My name is Wren Halloway. I'm 18, and I run the Saturday registers, the hardware store my grandfather Walter built in 1971 in Marshbrook, Pennsylvania, population 2,800. In my mother's house, I had a role, the grateful one, the quiet one, the one who said thank you for the leftover pork chop and the hand-me-down winter coat, and who learned by the age of 12 that crying at the kitchen table was the surest way to get sent to your room. On the morning of my 18th birthday, my mother slid a black leather portfolio across that same kitchen table, right between a plate of 3 pancakes and a candle stuck in the top one. She was smiling, not her work smile, not her church smile. The smile she'd worn 18 months earlier in the front row at my grandfather's funeral, while a lawyer I hadn't yet met sat 4 rows behind her and watched her cry exactly the right amount. "Honey," my mother said, in her women's circle voice, "before you eat, would you sign one little thing for the family?" She didn't know about Safety Deposit Box 1124 at First Marshbrook Savings. She didn't know about the USB drive that had been sitting inside it for almost 2 years with my name on a yellow sticky note. And she didn't know what my grandfather had said into a camera 6 weeks before he died. "Before I tell you what I tell you, and I said, do me one small favor. Hit subscribe, hit the bell. It tells me you're here, and the algorithm doesn't share these stories without it. Drop the name of your town and your local time in the comments." I read everyone later tonight. Now let me back up. 9 years. October 2017. My father's name was Wren Halloway. He died on October 14, 2017, on a private logging tract up near Tionesta Creek in Forest County, about an hour and a half north of where we lived. He was 34. A rotten white oak kicked back wrong off his chainsaw, and he didn't get out from under it in time. The trooper who came to our front door that evening held his hat against his stomach the entire time he was inside our house. He left without taking the coffee my grandmother poured him. I was 9. My mother cried for 9 days. She cried at the funeral. She cried at the casserole dinners my grandmother organized. She cried in the bathroom when she thought I was asleep. Then on the 10th morning, she put on lipstick and asked my grandfather Walter to drive her to the bank. I remember because I sat in the back seat of his Bronco and watched her check her hair in the visor mirror on the way there. She met Dale Tate 14 months later at a Crawford County Chamber of Commerce mixer she didn't have any real reason to attend. Dale was a freight broker. He had a small office above the Sherwin-Williams on Main Street with a fake leather couch and a calendar that was always 2 months behind. Loud man. Big watch. The kind of laugh that filled a room and made you wish you had parked closer to the door. Dale had a daughter named Reese. She was 8. Pink eyeglass frames, a backpack she carried even at restaurants, and a habit of looking at her father before she answered any direct question. My mother liked her instantly. My mother wanted a daughter who liked pink. They got married in March of 2019 at First Methodist in the side chapel because the main sanctuary was being repainted. I wore a navy dress my mother picked out without asking me. Reese wore white. My grandfather Walter came in late, sat in the back row, and left before the receiving line. He had asked my mother 3 times to wait a year. She had told him 3 times she was not going to. In my mother's house there were rules. Some written, most not. The written ones were on a piece of construction paper taped to the refrigerator. Shoes off at the door. No phones at dinner. The unwritten ones you learned by accident. If I cried, she called it drama. If I laughed too loud at something on television, she said, "Wren inside voice, please." If Reese did either, my mother said, "Oh, sweetie." By the time I was 12, I had stopped giving her either one. I went flat. I went quiet. I learned to put my feelings somewhere she couldn't see them. My grandfather noticed first. He didn't say anything for a long time. He just started picking me up earlier on Saturdays. The hardware store was on Lyman Street, 3 blocks from the courthouse. Halloway Hardware. Painted yellow because my grandmother had liked yellow. My grandfather had built it in 1971 with money he'd saved from 12 years of welding at a fabrication shop in Oil City. He sold paint, plumbing fittings, hand tools, garden seed, lawn fertilizer, and the occasional propane tank. He knew every contractor in 3 counties by first name and by which of them you could trust on a handshake. On Saturday mornings, he'd pull into our driveway at 8:15 sharp. He drove a Ford Bronco from 1989 that he refused to sell. He'd tap one knuckle against my bedroom window, and I'd come out with my coat half-buttoned. We'd drive to the store in a silence that wasn't uncomfortable. He'd let me run the key tag machine. He'd quiz me on which suppliers were honest, and which ones would short you a pallet if you didn't count. "Count everything twice, Wren," he'd say. "Then count it again on Monday." One Saturday in May of 2023, he took me into the back office of the store and laid out a stack of supplier invoices on the desk. He pointed to the small print at the bottom of one of them. "Look at the footer, Wren. Every document has one. Date generated, version number, page number. That tells you whether somebody pulled out an old template and modified it for you, or whether they drafted it fresh. In our business, it doesn't usually matter. In other businesses, it tells you everything." He said it the way he said all his lessons, as if he were teaching me to mind aid the gauge at a propane tank. I thought he was teaching me about invoices. He was teaching me how to read the document that, 3 years later, would be the one between my plate and my mother's coffee cup. I thought he was teaching me about hardware. He was teaching me something else, and it took me 5 years to understand what it was. My grandmother Lily died on a Tuesday in February of 2022. Stroke. She was 68. She went into the kitchen to make oatmeal and didn't come back out. My grandfather was in the garage. I was at school. The neighbor heard the kettle screaming. After Lily, my grandfather got quieter, not sadder. Quieter, the way a house gets quieter in the evening, not the way one gets in a storm. He started making lists. He started taking me with him to Meadville on Wednesday afternoons. 28 miles south on Route 322, then a left on Park Avenue, then a brick building on the corner with a green awning, Halverson Law Office. Marianne Halverson was somewhere north of 60, white-haired, narrow-faced, with a green cardigan she wore in every season I knew her. She had a fiddle-leaf fig on her windowsill that she sometimes remembered to water. The first time my grandfather brought me into her office, she asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up. I said I didn't know. She said, "Good." She said that was the right answer for 15. I didn't understand at the time why we went there. My grandfather would talk to her about boring grown-up things, taxes and beneficiary designations and the trust language, and I would sit on the leather chair by the window and read whatever book I had brought. Sometimes she'd ask me a direct question. What were my plans for after high school? Did I have my own bank account? Did my mother have access to it? I answered everyone honestly. I didn't know there was reason she was asking. In April of 2024, my grandfather sat me down in the cab of the Bronco behind the hardware store and told me he had pancreatic cancer. Stage 3 at presentation. He had known for 2 weeks and hadn't told my mother yet. He told me first. "Wren," he said, looking straight through the windshield at the back of the building, "I'm going to be honest with you about something. Your mother is going to be very interested in my will after I'm gone. I need you to be ready for that. Not afraid. Ready. There's a difference." I asked him what I needed to do. He said nothing. He said the only thing I needed to do was keep being myself. He said Marian was handling the rest. He went to Mrs. Halverson's office one more time without me on May 14, 2024. He didn't tell me why. He came home with his coat folded over his arm and a quietness in him that wasn't his old quietness. It was something completed. He died on June 28, 2024. Hospice, home. I was holding his left hand. My mother was in the kitchen on the phone with Dale. The funeral was at First Methodist. My mother wore navy. She cried the right amount, 3 rows in front of me. Dale sat next to her and looked at his phone twice. Reese sat next to him with her shoulders pulled up to her ears, the way she sat in dentists' offices. Mrs. Halverson sat 4 rows behind in a black coat and didn't speak to anyone. She nodded at me once, on her way out, and was gone. The will was read 2 weeks later in Mrs. Halverson's office in Meadville. My mother and Dale drove down together. I drove down with my Aunt Ruth, my father's younger sister, who lived in Erie and worked night shifts in the cardiac intensive care unit at UPMC Haymote. Ruth was 48, divorced, dry, and one of the few people in our family my mother had never been able to charm. Mrs. Halverson read the document aloud. 3 things, mostly. The house on Lyman Street to my mother, the hardware store to my mother for fair market sale or continued operation, at her discretion, and a trust in my name, $680,000 in blue-chip equities and treasury notes, irrevocable. Spendthrift clause in Section 7, corporate trustee at Susquehanna Trust Services in Harrisburg. Distribution authorized for tuition, housing, medical, and reasonable living. Not accessible to any other family member, full stop, in perpetuity. My mother's mouth tightened when Mrs. Halverson read the trustee's name. She had expected to be the trustee. She did not say anything. Mrs. Halverson also mentioned briefly a UTMA custodial cash account in my name, $42,000. My mother as custodian under the Pennsylvania Uniform Transfers to Minors Act terminates on my 18th birthday. My mother nodded once and said, "Of course, that's just for Wren's college." There was one more thing. Mrs. Halverson did not read it aloud. She handed me a sealed envelope and said, "For your 18th birthday, Wren, not before. Your grandfather was very specific." My mother held out her hand for it. Mrs. Halverson did not move. After a long second, my mother lowered her hand. I put the envelope in my jacket pocket. I did not open it for 16 months. 3 weeks after the will reading, my mother had the locks on the hardware store changed. I noticed because my key didn't work on a Saturday morning. I stood on the sidewalk on Lyman Street with the key in my hand for a full minute. The yellow paint above the door looked dirtier than I remembered. I walked home. Dale started coming to the store in the afternoons. He'd walk around with a clipboard, asking suppliers questions in a voice that wasn't his customers'. The suppliers were polite. They were also confused. Don Krupke from Krupke Plumbing called my Aunt Ruth in Erie one Wednesday and asked her, careful and slow, whether Walter's family was selling the building. Aunt Ruth called me. I said I didn't know. She said, "Wren, pay attention." I started paying attention. My mother began bringing up the trust in the kitchen, casually, always with food in front of her, always with my favorite food in front of me. Pot roast, pecan pie, the brown sugar oatmeal I'd liked when I was 8. "Sweetie, do you understand what an irrevocable trust really means?" "Sweetie, lawyers eat trusts alive with fees. Did you know that?" "Sweetie, when you turn 18, we should sit down with a friend of Dale's. He helps families restructure these things properly." I said, "Sure, Mom." Every time, I cut my pot roast into smaller and smaller pieces. One night in early October of 2025, 6 months before I turned 18, I went into my grandfather's house. My mother had been renting it furnished to a couple from Pittsburgh, but they had moved out the week before and she hadn't been by yet to clean. I had my own key. I walked through the rooms. Everything was exactly where my grandfather had left it. The smell was almost gone. Almost. In the bottom drawer of the nightstand on his side of the bed, under a folded handkerchief, I found a small black leather notebook, octavo, the kind hardware store managers used to use to track inventory before everything moved on to computers. The cover was worn smooth in one corner where his thumb had rested. I sat down on the edge of his bed and opened it. The first entries were from April 2024, inventory lists, supplier balances. Then, 2 pages in, the handwriting shifted. Smaller, tighter, different ink. April 9, cancer confirmed. 2 weeks tops before need to moves. April 18, Marion as new trust draft, corporate trustee, spendthrift, section 7. April 30, Marion, UTMA, limit damage, already at risk. May 14, camera, 7 minutes. Box 1124. The entries went on for 2 months, names, phone numbers, a list of suppliers with their handshake terms, a page titled Picket, just that, one word, and a phone number with a 4 to 12 area code. The last entry was in August of 2024, 2 months after he died. Impossible, of course, except that he had written it before. The handwriting was unsteady, the way it had been in the final 2 weeks. If she changes the locks on the store, call Marian. April 15 is the day. The key is at Marian's, the box is at First Marshbrook Savings. Wren, you're the one I trusted. I know what kind of daughter you are. Love, Grandpa. I sat on his bed in his empty house for 40 minutes. I didn't cry. I wanted to. I did not. I closed the notebook. I put it in my backpack between 2 textbooks. I walked home in the dark and I went to bed, and I did not sleep. The next morning I called Halverson from the parking lot of my high school during my lunch period. Her receptionist answered. I gave my name. There was a pause on the other end that wasn't really a pause. Mrs. Halverson came on the line in under 30 seconds. Wren, I've been waiting for this call. Can you come down to Meadville on Saturday? I said yes. I told my mother I was meeting friends to look at colleges. She offered to drive me. I said Aunt Ruth was picking me up. My mother said that was fine in a voice that meant she would be making a phone call about it later. Aunt Ruth picked me up at 9. She didn't ask questions. She drove the 28 miles to Meadville with one hand on the wheel and the other holding a thermos of coffee. She dropped me at the brick building with the green awning at 10 and said she'd be at the diner across the street, and I should take as long as I needed. Mrs. Halverson's office hadn't changed. The fiddle leaf fig was still alive, mostly. The green cardigan was draped over her chair. She motioned for me to sit. I put the black notebook on her desk. She looked at it for a long time. She did not pick it up. Tell me what you found, Wren. In your own words. I told her. She listened. She did not interrupt. When I was done, she opened the bottom drawer of her desk, took out a manila file, set it between us, and tapped it once. I'm going to teach you a term, Wren. UTMA. It stands for the Uniform Transfers to Minors Act. The Pennsylvania version is called PMA. Your grandfather put $42,000 in that account for you the year you were born. Your mother is the custodian. That is a legal role. It is not a parental role. The legal word for it is fiduciary. It comes from the Latin word for trust. Every dollar she spends from that account has to be for your benefit. Not hers, not Reese's, not the heating bill or the property taxes. Yours. The standard is strict. The records are required. She handed me a single sheet of paper, a login URL for First Marshbrook Savings, an account number, a temporary password. This is the parallel access your grandfather requested. Log in. I'll wait. I logged in on her office tablet. The balance, as of October 8, 2025, was $9,347.12. I stared at it. Mrs. Halverson did not say anything. I scrolled through the transactions. $92 withdrawals. $300 withdrawals. A $1,500 transfer in May labeled Household. A $2,000 transfer in August labeled Allegheny College. Deposit R. Reese had been accepted to Allegheny on rolling admission in July. The deposit had come out of my UTMA. I closed the tablet. I looked up. This is a violation, Mrs. Halverson said. It is also a pattern. You can take this to orphans' court when you are ready. It is a small, slow process. You are not going to get all of that money back, but you can get most of it. We will get to that. First, the bigger thing. She slid a second folder across the desk. The cover page said, Halloway Family Liquidity Bridge Agreement. My full legal name on the signature line. Wren Ann Halloway. Date line, April 15, 2026. The day I turned 18, I read it, carefully, page by page the way my grandfather had taught me to count pallets. It proposed that, on or after my 18th birthday, I take a personal loan of $180,000 against my trust principal to fund shared family priorities, including Reese Tate's undergraduate education at Allegheny College, refinancing on the Halloway hardware commercial property, and consolidating Dale Tate's outstanding equipment notes at Northwest Bank. Repayment in 5 years, at 0% interest, from future family income. Page 7. In language that took me 2 readings to fully understand, specified that if the loan was not repaid in full within 5 years, the unpaid balance would convert to a direct assignment of my beneficial interest in the trust, equivalent to the unpaid principal, plus a 10% administrative fee. It was a trap dressed up as a hug. "Who drafted this?" I said. Mrs. Halverson tapped the footer with one finger. "Roland Pickett. Pickett and Howe, Pittsburgh. He's been your mother's attorney since August. He has one prior reprimand from the Pennsylvania Disciplinary Board from 2019 for irregularities in a trust matter very similar to this one. You can look it up yourself. The website is pedisciplinaryboard.org. It is public." I looked it up later that night, in my room with the door locked. The reprimand was real. The matter described was misuse of fiduciary structures to redirect beneficiary distributions. It read like a draft of what was being done to me. Mrs. Halverson then explained the second thing my grandfather had built around me. The thing that mattered most. "Your grandfather and I put one more wall between you and any of this. It's called a spendthrift clause. It is in Section 7 of your trust document. What it does is this: it makes your beneficial interest unassignable. You cannot, in a moment of pressure or pity or confusion, sign your trust interest over to a creditor, not even to your own mother. The trust will refuse to honor any assignment on the trustee's own authority. It is a lock that protects you from your own future self. It is also why this loan agreement, in its current form, would fail the moment Susquehanna Trust Services reviewed it. They would not transfer a dollar. So she can't actually take it. She cannot take it the way the document is written. She can, however, get you to sign something that you then spend 3 years and $20,000 in legal fees trying to undo while she spends. The point of these documents, Wren, is rarely the document itself. It is what happens between the signing and the unwinding." I nodded. "There is one more thing," she said. She took an envelope out of a fire-rated cabinet behind her desk. It was the same envelope my grandfather had handed me at age 16, the one I'd left in my jacket pocket and not opened. She slid it across. "This holds the key to Safety Deposit Box 1124 at First Marshbrook Savings. The box is in the name of the Halloway Family Trust. You are the sole beneficiary, with right of access on or after your 18th birthday. Inside the box there is a USB drive. On the USB drive there is video. Your grandfather sat in this chair on May 14, 2024. I set up a small camera on the windowsill. He spoke for 7 minutes, looking straight down the lens. He named your mother by full name. He named Dale by full name. He named Reese," he explained on the record, while he was indisputably of sound mind, what he intended and what he expected anyone reading his will to ignore. "We call it a testator deposition. Lawyers use it to make will contests very hard. Your grandfather made it for that reason and also, I think, for you." I put my hand on the envelope. "I want you to leave it in this office, Wren, until April 14. The night before your birthday, you and I will come together, and on the morning of April 15, at 9 a. we will walk into First Marshbrook Saves. You will sign the activation letter as the new principal of the trust, and you will retrieve the USB drive yourself. You will be of age. It will be your hand on the box. That is how your grandfather wanted it." I said okay. She said one more thing, the most important thing she ever said to me, and I have carried it with me since. "Wren, the most useful thing you can do for the sons is nothing. Do not change your face. Do not change your routine. Do not change what time you come down for breakfast. Your mother is reading you the way she always has. Let her read what she expects to read. We will use the time." I did what she said. For 6 months I was the quiet daughter. I came down for breakfast at 7:30. I said good morning. I let my mother top up my orange juice. I let Dale leave his coffee mug on the counter for me to wash. I sat through dinner conversations about family planning and smart structures, and what Roland will help us put together. I said, "Sure, Mom," every time. I did not let my hands shake. I did not let my eyes give anything away. I overheard her on the phone with Pickett, twice. The first time in January through the heating vent above my bedroom. The second time in February, in the laundry room, when she didn't know I was on the back stairs. She used the word compliant, she said. Wren is the compliant one. She will sign. Reese is the one we need to handle carefully. Pickett's voice on the speakerphone said something I couldn't make out, then a laugh. My mother laughed too, the soft laugh she used in church. I went back upstairs. I did my history homework. The night before my 18th birthday, my mother made pot roast and pecan pie. She lit candles. She told me she had something important to discuss with me at breakfast the next morning. Special breakfast. Just family. Pancakes my favorite since I was 6. I said pancakes sounded great, Mom. I went up to my room at 9. I lay in the dark with my hand on my phone and stared at the ceiling. At 11:15, I texted Aunt Ruth. Tomorrow. She wrote back in under a minute. I'll be parked at the corner of Maple and 8th at 9:50. Walter would have driven you himself. I'm proxy. I slept 4 hours. At 8:45 on the morning of April 15, 2026, I walked into Mrs. Halverson's office in Meadville. She was wearing the green cardigan. She handed me the envelope with the key. We drove together to First Marshbrook Savings in her Volvo and parked at 9 o'clock exactly. The branch manager, a woman named Donna Eck, was waiting for us. She had been briefed. I signed the activation letter. The trust was now in my own name, Wren Halloway, Principal. Susquehanna Trust Services, Corporate Trustee. The spendthrift clause active and inviolable. Donna walked me to the vault. She turned her key, in box 1124. I turned mine. The box slid out. Inside, a USB drive on a yellow sticky note in my grandfather's handwriting. For Wren, trust the document. Trust Marion. You are not alone. I put the USB in my pocket. Mrs. Halverson and I drove back to her office. She loaded the file onto her laptop and let me watch it once. I watched my grandfather for 7 minutes. I did not look away. He said exactly what Mrs. Halverson said he would say. He said it without anger, without bitterness, like a man closing a ledger. When it was over, Mrs. Halverson said, "It's your decision how you use it, Wren, or whether." I said, "I'm going home for breakfast." She nodded. I drove myself the 28 miles back to Marshbrook. I parked at the curb. I walked up the porch steps at 9:52. Aunt Ruth's Civic was already idling at Maple and 8th. The kitchen smelled like pancakes. My mother was at the stove in her pink quilted robe. Dale was at the table in a polo, his coffee mug next to the salt shaker, the way he always left it for me. Reese was in her pajamas, scrolling her phone, propped against the orange juice pitcher. A black leather portfolio sat to the right of my mother's place setting, not hidden, visible, bound. 3 pancakes on my plate, tower stacked, 1 unlit candle on top. "There's my birthday girl," my mother said. She crossed the kitchen and hugged me. 3 seconds longer than usual. She smelled like her Estee Lauder and bacon grease. 18. I can't believe it. Dale lit the candle with a Bic. "Make a wish, kiddo." I leaned forward. I thought, I wish for my grandfather to know what happens next. I blew it out. I sat down. I cut into the top pancake. The portfolio was the same color as my grandfather's notebook. I think she had picked it on purpose. I think she thought it would feel familiar. She let me eat 2 bites. Then she folded her hands as, "Honey, now that you're 18, there's something we need to talk about. That money from Grandpa." Roland helped us put together something simple. She slid the portfolio 3 inches to the right. It came to rest against my plate. I said, "May I read it first?" She said, "Of course, sweetheart. Take your time." I opened it. I knew exactly what was inside. I had read the draft 6 months earlier in Mrs. Halverson's office. I had memorized the page numbers. I read it again anyway, slowly, with my finger, the way my grandfather had taught me to count pallets. I mouthed the harder words. At minute 3, my mother's smile lost its corners. At minute 5, Dale said, "Wren, you don't have to read every line, kiddo. It's just family structure stuff." I said, "I like to understand what I'm signing." He said, "Roland can walk you through it after if you want." I said, "Dale, you just said Roland. Mom said a friend of yours." A small silence. I checked the footer of page 11. Generated November 17, 2025. Version 4.1. 5 months before that morning. 4 versions before this one. My grandfather had told me to look at the footer. I was looking. I turned to page 7. I tapped the paragraph. Mom. This page says that if I take a $180,000 loan against my trust and don't repay it within 5 years, my trust interest is assigned to a holding entity at 10% administrative fee. Did you know this was in here? She said, honey, those are just contingencies. They never actually trigger. I said, who is the holding entity? She didn't answer. I said, Mom, the holding entity is named on page 9. It's a Delaware LLC called Het Holdings, formed in November of last year. Sole member Dale Tate. Dale set his mug down. Wren. I said, and there's a separate clause on page 11 in section 4 that says nothing in this agreement may be deemed to violate the spendthrift provisions of the underlying trust. Which is interesting, because my trust's spendthrift clause makes the assignment in section 7 legally unenforceable from the start. So this document doesn't actually work the way it's written. The only thing it does is get a signature, and a signature buys 3 years of litigation. Did Roland tell you that part? My mother's face was doing several things at once. Her mouth was open. Her eyes were not. Reese had lifted her face from her phone and was looking at her mother the way you look at a stranger on a bus. Wren, my mother said, where are you getting this language? From my attorney, Mom, Marian Halverson, Grandpa's attorney. She's been my attorney since October. Dale stood up, I said. Dale, sit down. He sat down. I took my phone out of my pocket. I opened the file. I set the phone on the table, screen up between the maple syrup and the salt shaker. I tapped play. Opened on my grandfather leather chair. Green sweater on Mrs. Halverson's coat rack behind him. His hands folded in his lap. The fiddle leaf fig on the windowsill, taller than I remembered. He cleared his throat. My name is Walter James Halloway. Today's date is May 14, 2024. I am 69 years old. I am of sound mind. I have been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, but the cancer has not yet affected my cognition, and I have a letter from Dr. Araveen Subramanian at Hamot Medical Center stating as much attached to this file. My mother made a small sound. I'm recording this because I know my daughter Eileen. I know my son-in-law Dale Tate, and I anticipate that after I am gone, there will be efforts to redirect what I have left to my granddaughter Wren. I want to be very clear on the record, while no one can claim I was confused what I intend. He looked straight into the camera. The trust is for Wren. The spendthrift clause is intentional. The corporate trustee is intentional. The UTM account is intentional, although I know it will be vulnerable. Eileen, if you are watching this with Wren in the room, I want you to know that I know what you will likely have done. I am sorry, I gave you many chances to be the mother she deserved. You chose otherwise. My mother sat down. She had been standing. I hadn't seen her stand. To be absolutely clear, nothing in this trust is for Reese Tate. Reese is not my granddaughter. This is not unkindness toward Reese, who I hope grows up well. It is precision. If you are reading my will and reaching for the word family to argue otherwise, please understand that I anticipated you. I made provisions. He paused. He looked away from the camera for a moment, then back. Wren, if you are watching this with relatives in the room, I love you. I saw you. Your grandmother saw you. We were not the only ones who saw you, but we were the ones who could do something about it. Trust the document. Trust Marian. You are not alone in this. You never were. He nodded once at the camera. Mrs. Halverson's hand briefly appeared at the edge of the frame, reaching for the camera. Screen dark. The kitchen was very quiet. Reese was crying, quietly, not for show. Dale's hands were on the table. His face was a color I'd never seen on him before. My mother's eyes were closed. My phone vibrated. The name on the screen said Marian Halverson. The time on the screen said 10:03 a.m. I picked up. I tapped speaker. Wren, are you home? Yes. Are you safe? Yes. Is your mother present? Yes, Mrs. Tate. This is Marian Halverson. I am calling on behalf of my client, Wren Halloway. I am informing you that the trust activation completed at 9:14 this morning at First Marshbrook Savings. My client is now the principal of the Halloway Family Trust. The spendthrift clause is in full effect. Any document presented to her today, including the one drafted by Mr. Roland Pickett titled the Halloway Family Bridge Agreement, is unenforceable against the trust on its face. My mother's mouth opened. Additionally, I am informing you that this morning at 8:40 a.m., I filed a petition in Crawford County Orphans Court on Wren's behalf, requesting a full accounting of the UTMA custodial account and seeking restitution of approximately $32,700 in withdrawals that appear to lack a permitted custodial purpose. You will be served by close of business. My mother said. Marian, Mrs. Halverson said. Mrs. Tate. I am also informing you that on Monday morning I will file a formal complaint with the Pennsylvania Disciplinary Board regarding Mr. Pickett's involvement in drafting the agreement now in your kitchen. His prior reprimand is on the record. This will be his second. My mother said, Marian, please. Mrs. Halverson said, Mrs. Tate. I'm not finished. Wren is leaving your house this morning with her aunt. She is 18 and legally independent. You will not contact her except through me. If you need to send her a birthday card, send it to my office. Goodbye. She hung up. I closed the portfolio. I set it on the table. I stood up. I said, Mom, I'm not going to yell at you. I don't have anything cruel to say. I also don't have anything kind. I am going to leave. My mother said, Wren, I did this for our family. I said, I know you believe that. I walked to the coat rack. I put on my jacket. I put my shoes on at the door. Reese got up from the table. She followed me to the entryway. She did not look at her mother. She put her hand on my sleeve, very lightly. Wren, I didn't know. I know you didn't, Reese. You're 16. You didn't do this. Don't carry it. Text me in a year when you've moved out for school. I mean it. I'll buy the coffee. She nodded. She wiped her face. I opened the front door. The April sun was the pale, washed-out kind we get in Northwest Pennsylvania, the kind that doesn't warm you yet but tells you the warming is coming. Aunt Ruth's Civic was at the corner. She was leaning against the hood with a thermos. I walked down the driveway. I did not look back. If your jaw just unclenched, do me one more small thing. Tap the like button. It tells the algorithm somebody listened. I'll be right here when you come back to it. Aunt Ruth lived in a second-floor apartment on a tree-lined street in Erie. She had a sectional couch with a quilt on it, a gray cat named Walter who judged everyone on sight, a coffee table with one water ring. She pointed out to me with a small, embarrassed laugh. She made me grilled cheese for dinner. I slept for 11 hours. My mother called 14 times the first week. I did not pick up, Aunt Ruth said. Block them. Marian will tell you which ones to unblock later. I blocked them. The orphans' court petition was served on a Tuesday. My mother hired a different attorney, not Pickett. Pickett was, by then, not answering calls from anyone. The accounting was produced under court order. The number was worse than I had thought. $36,400. The judge, an older woman with a calm voice, ordered repayment with interest, in installments, over 4 years. My mother sold the second car to make the first payment. I saw my mother once, during the proceeding in late May, in the hallway of the courthouse on Diamond Street in Meadville. She was wearing a beige suit I had never seen before. She did not look at me. I did not look at her. We were called into adjacent rooms by different bailiffs. Aunt Ruth walked between us, holding 2 coffees, like a referee at a fight that hadn't started. The hardware store had to be unwound. My mother had filed for a fictitious name registration at the county courthouse to begin transferring the property into Halloway Tate Enterprises, but she had not actually completed the deed transfer before April 15. The store reverted to her sole ownership under my grandfather's will. She sold it in August to a contractor from New Wilmington who repainted the front a different color and kept Don Krupke's account. I drove past it once in the fall. It was the wrong yellow. Dale's freight brokerage took a credit hit in May when Northwest Bank pulled a line of credit after seeing the orphan's court filing on a routine check. He moved his office out of the building above Sherwin-Williams. He and my mother filed for legal separation of their finances in June. They did not divorce. As far as I know, they are still in the same house. The Pennsylvania Disciplinary Board acknowledged Marion's complaint within 10 days. They opened a formal investigation in September. As of the day I am telling you this, the investigation is ongoing. Pickett has not been suspended. He has not been cleared. The process slows on purpose, and I have made peace with the fact that I may not see a final outcome for 2 more years, if ever. Justice on the page is sometimes faster than justice in the world. I have learned to be patient. Reese texted me in late June. One line, "I'm sorry, I really didn't know." I waited 2 days. Then I texted back, "I know. You're not who I'm angry at. I'll be at Aunt Ruth's all summer. The door is not closed." She wrote back a heart. She has since then applied to and been accepted at Penn State Behrend instead of Allegheny. She is paying her own deposit on a partial scholarship and a part-time job at a coffee shop in Edinburgh. I am very proud of her. I have not told her that yet. I will. I started at Allegheny College in Meadenville in August of 2026. The Margaret Trust, as I quietly renamed it in honor of my grandmother on the day I activated it, paid my first semester's tuition without incident. Susquehanna Trust Services emails me a quarterly statement. The principal is up 4%. I am taking philosophy, American history, and a constitutional law seminar I am almost certainly not ready for. My roommate is named Priya. She laughs loudly in a way nobody has ever told her to bring inside. I am learning, slowly, to laugh that way too. Mrs. Halverson and I still meet once a quarter in her brick office on Park Avenue. She still wears the green cardigan. The fiddle leaf fig has gotten taller. She still doesn't water it as often as she should. We go over the trust statements. She quizzes me on a few terms I have learned, then a few I haven't. She tells me when I have made a small bad assumption about something legal. I am learning very slowly what my grandfather went to her office on Wednesday afternoons to learn. I am not going to tell you that I forgive my mother. I haven't. I am also not going to tell you that I will never speak to her. I don't know. What I have learned is this. The people who tell you that family is the most important thing are often the same people who use that word as a lever. Family is not a lever. Family is the people who, when they cannot speak anymore, leave behind a notebook with your name in it. Family is the woman in a green cardigan who keeps a key in a fire-safe drawer for 16 months because somebody once asked her to. Family is the aunt who parks at the corner of Maple and 8th at 9:50 in the morning because she promised. That's all. Anything else that calls itself family and asks you to sign something at breakfast is asking for something else. If you made it this far with me, thank you. I know that wasn't easy. Drop one word in the comments. Just one. What do you wish someone had told you on the morning of your 18th birthday? I read every comment. I answer the ones I can. If you want to hear what happened the first time my mother tried to call me, 6 months after I left, the story is linked into the description. A note before you go. The legal mechanisms in this story: the irrevocable trust with a corporate trustee, the spendthrift clause, the testator video deposition, the UTMA custodial account with a fiduciary duty owed to a minor child, are real instruments used every day by estate attorneys across the United States. Laws differ from state to state, and what works in Pennsylvania may be structured differently in your own state. If anything in this story made you think about your own family, please do not act on what you heard in a YouTube comment section. Sit down with a licensed estate attorney in the state where the older persons in your life lives. The American Bar Association keeps a free lawyer directory at apps, americanbar.org/legal services, BOF legal help. If you suspect an older relative is being financially exploited, the National Council on Aging offers its a confidential helpline at 1-800-677-1116. I am not a lawyer, and nothing in this story is legal advice. I am someone who wanted to tell a story about a granddaughter who was paid attention to by exactly one person, and what that one person made possible. My grandfather spent the last year of his life writing notes for a granddaughter who hadn't asked him to. That's not paranoia. That's love that did its homework.